Our first panelist is Mr. Kalyan Ranjan. He's a consultant ex-Hindustan Coca-Cola Beverages. So he's the Coca-Cola India head. And Ranjan ji is a keen watcher and student of public policy, passionate about impactful CSR with over 32 years of experience. He he consults and he advises senior dignitaries, senior people in government, industry associations, communities, and NGOs. So, thank you, Kalyanji, for coming here. Mr. Ravish Ranjan Shukla, Special Correspondent, NDTV. Ravish ji may be able to join sometime later. We have Annapurna Jhaji. She may also join a little later. Miss Shradha Chhetri ji, she's assistant editor, Career 360 News. Shradha ji is a senior journalist with over decade of experience in education and employment news. One of the key things which every Divyangjan or every human being after one studies and gets educated, he or she looks for is employment, and Shradha ji has immense experience in that space. She has worked with significantly good publications like Times of India, Indian Express, Hindustan Times, Indo-Asian News Service. Coming from a small village, a small place, Kalimpong in West Bengal, she has achieved great heights of success, and we are truly proud that she's part of Sarthak. She's part of our pillar support system at Sarthak and I. Thank you. Mr. Vicky Roy, documentary photographer. Mr. Vicky Roy is a self-taught photographer. He has he has been he has been recognized by MIT Media Fellowship in 2014 and has been listed in Forbes Asia 30 under 30. So somebody whom the youth look up to. Vicky Roy, acclaimed name in the international documentary photography uh, trait, and we are very happy that Vicky Roy ji is part of this panel. So I would request now Supriyo ji to take this conversation forward and ensure how media and communication can actually build the narrative in favor of Divyangjan. Over to you, ji.
Good afternoon, everybody. Um, I think this is the 7th year, Dr. Agarwal, if I'm not mistaken, that you've put me on this seat. And I think we ask ourselves every time the same question. What is it that needs to be done to get media more interested? How do you get the stories that need to be talked about, really talked about? And I think it's important to understand that, I think it's important to understand the kind of issues, pulls, pressures that goes into making of news in order to address the question of, therefore, why is it that we are not really getting reported upon? I look at the two things that really made big news this time from the the domain of people with disability this year. One was India's achievements of the para-athletes. So everybody stood up, somebody gave awards, everybody did the photo opportunities around it. And it was a very impressive, a very, very impressive achievement. 29 medals, more than what we get in our normal ones. So it's absolutely amazing that given the space which was there, and it really splashed over. But then there was the other one, which was Pooja Khedkar, right? And if you really compare the two, you would see some anchors, for instance, they went on and on about Pooja Khedkar and how she had lied about her mental and visual condition in order to get a position. Somewhere along the line, I think between these two stories, we look at it and say that's the kind of stories that happen. Either it's a superhero story or it is, बहुत बदमाशी हुई है kind of stories. And I'll give you a very simple example of the last week, 10 days. There was a criminal who had a limp and he was identified by his limp on a CCTV. Times of India carried it on its front page. The Prime Minister gave a speech on the International Day of Disability that was carried on the 8th page of Times of India. That's the volume and the approach that ends up happening on this. Okay? So we will explore this, and when I will leave my comments at the end when I am pushing a few agendas, which I shall push at the end of it. But really, I'll go around here. I will come to Vicky, who's written a book, but just give me a second to come out there. But let's start with Kalyan. On the overall issues that we really talk about, on why people don't get, and you have been, Kalyan and I have worked together in multiple roles. He used to be somebody who's worked with me when I was in Rediffusion. Then he joined Coca-Cola. Before that, I think he's been with Amway, if I'm not mistaken. So he has, in his communication roles, he's worked across a spectrum. And he's worked on exciting times in the Coca-Cola history, especially when those crises and issues used to come up. So it'll be interesting to hear how does he put his lens of a communications professional over a very long career. And let's talk about how does he see the sector, how do you think it can make stories?
Thank you, Supriyo. Good that you said, otherwise I would have said that. For those who don't know, he is my ex-boss and he continues to be. Yeah, so 2-3 days ago he asked me, okay, no matter how busy or how free you are on Saturday, you better come. I said, okay, I'll reschedule some of the things that was already there. So I did that, and so I'm here. Yeah, he talked about that Puja Kedkar issue. So I'll start from there only. Yes, it was all over the media for many days. What went missing is, while it talked about misuse of so-called disability clause, I would have loved to see media raising the issue of all those positions which is reserved for PwDs but have not been filled in so many years. There is a provision for reservation. So while you reported extensively on one issue of misuse, the better narrative would have been talk about all the vacant positions which would have been filled long time ago, and those vacancies are only, the numbers are increasing. Yeah. So coming to some data points. So again, I was going through some data points, and the last census which happened was in 2011, and as per 2011 census data, almost 26.8 million of our citizens are people with disability, which would be probably more than a few, the total population of some of the European countries put together. In percentage terms, again, the same data, it's almost 2.2% of the India's population in 2011 as per census consists of disabled people. Huge number. आज के political narrative में everybody is talking about caste census. Why not enough noise or is being made about what about people with disability? And I'm not making it a caste issue, but the fact is it's a huge section of population which is not getting its due in any discussion, any deliberation. Now one suggestion, now this whole consultation process for next year budget had started. I don't know if it has happened in the past or not. It's high time that on behalf of PwDs, a representation is, they become part of that whole consultation process. And consultation is not only about asking for more money, but asking for their due. Money is one part, but all the budgetary provision that had been made in the past, how has it been used, if it has been used, to what extent, and what outcome? So those things, and those things while we can talk about, but it needs to be raised by the fourth state. So, so that's my opening comment, and then we can keep on talking. But I've also gone through some of the media headlines, so we'll talk about that later on. So, Supriyo, over to you.
Yeah, could you pass it to Yeah, Rati, over to you. Why don't you give us an overview of what you do and then get into the issue of, if that
Sure.
works.
So my name is Rati, and I currently head an organization called the Milaan Foundation, where we work with adolescent girls, creating pathways for their health, education, and safety. But for the longest time, I've been associated with the disability sector, having worked with multiple organizations from Special Olympics to Samarthanam to the National Center for Employment of Persons with Disabilities. I continue to remain a very passionate advocate, I think, for the rights of persons with disabilities. And I think mine will be opening and closing comments at the same time. But I really do have some, when I look at persons with disabilities and media, I think I'd group my comments into three buckets. I think the first bucket would definitely be presentation. Have you, like Supriyo said and you said that, it's either the trophy or the tragedy. We'll either celebrate the Paralympics or we'll celebrate, or we'll, talk about that person who died. I mean, just very recently, I don't know if any of you remember this conversation, this news item. Somewhere, I think in Allahabad or Banaras, a couple fought, a man and a woman fought. The woman, they had a severely disabled child, and I think the father fought with the mother over the child. She went and flung him in the river, and the next day the body of that child was found, having eaten by crocodiles. It just made mother of disabled child throws him into the water, or some such really nonsensical thing which didn't even touch the issue, the extent of the issue, the seriousness of the issue, what kind of safeguards, what kind of security are you providing to people who are dealing with children with disabilities? That's one part. So, sorry? Okay. So that was my first part. I mean, when we look at, historically, you look at cinema, for example, जो आपका विकलांग आदमी होता is either the villain or a shakuni mama limping his way around. The villain has always been a person with disability. When are we going to break that stereotype? You're looking at 3 movies, I can tell you on my fingertips. There was a Black, there was a Barfi, and there was a Shrikant. That's it. We have not been able to showcase disability in any positive disability stories through our media, through our films, through anywhere. The third thing I'm still stuck on my first bucket, and which is to say that when I watch, and I'm not too much of a movie watcher, I'm not too much of a television watcher, but on few times that I have watched OTT platforms, and I just love the way they even make a statement. Your character doesn't have to be disabled, but the way a statement is made. For example, I think this thing called Notting Hill. Right at the end, I think the last scene shows the protagonist's sister coming in to say, I've come to check the accessibility of the hotel. Drives a point home, you talk of accessibility of the infrastructure. There's another program I've seen, I think, pardon me on that one, it's all about drunk mothers and drunk families and a very dysfunctional family. But one of them is married to a wheelchair user. I'd really encourage all of you to go and watch that serial. I forget, I can tell you the name of it, where the man is just so normal. There's no over-the-top acting, there's no shaking, there's no shivering. The man is on the wheelchair, he performs his duties, he lives like a normal man. That normalcy is, I think, what we are failing to include in everything that we are showing. So that was my first part, which is, of course, the presentation. The second part I would bring about would be the representation. As Kalyan said, now you're talking of the budgets. We go to the housewives to say, ये budget आपको कैसे impact करेगा? आपने किसी विकलांग आदमी के पास गए हैं पूछने के लिए कि अगर आपके wheelchair पर या आपके cane में हम GST 18% लगा रहे हैं, how is that impacting your life? Is it impacting your life? What do you think about it? What are your suggestions? How can we make things better? So, I mean, where are those stories where everything we cover, we should be looking at everything that the media covers, importantly through a disability lens, just like they do from a gender lens and others. That's my second part. And the third part, of course, is the whole thing around accessibility. In today's digital times and with technology that does not discriminate, people with disabilities still remain discriminated because sometimes your websites are not accessible, sometimes your apps are not accessible, your platforms are not accessible. This is a fundamental right of a person living in India, whether he's disabled or not. And I just think this is something that should not be a non-negotiable. Given the population, Kalyan mentioned 2%, 2% is a joke. The percentage of population is definitely above 7 to 10%. And now if you add India's fast-growing geriatric population that is also getting disabled with time, I think you're looking at almost 20% of the country's population, if not more, people who are going to be living with disabilities, and we can't exclude them, we can't discriminate, we can't isolate them any further, is whether media or otherwise, is perhaps what I'd like to say.
Absolutely fantastic. That was a great opening. Shradha, you're the only genuine media representative here. So let's put the spotlight on you. Right? Why are you guys so bad?
Yeah. So it's a difficult question to answer, considering my position right now. But yes, I would candidly admit media does not do enough representation in terms of people with disability, because I think having worked at the mainstream newspapers and now at a digital platform, frankly speaking, because that's how the system has been in place, right? So it's always believed from the top to the down that the population is not that big enough to matter. That's the narrative which is there, right? It's there, like, and 1%, 2% trying to shake does not actually happen, because there needs to be an overhaul from the top to the bottom, because that's how it works. So having said that on why media does not do representation, also comes to the fact that media itself needs education, right? So media professionals, I think the starting point, because we always discuss on why media doesn't do it, but also it's important to point out that media needs some kind of training, right? If it be the top bosses, or it be a cub reporter, or it be somebody of a mid-level, they need to be taught. There needs to be some kind of collaboration between the organizations which has been working with disability in the disability sector, and there needs to be some kind of consultative process, and there needs to be some kind of understanding and some kind of training that needs to happen, because for media as now, what matters is, like Sir mentioned in when he started, on how, it's either an inspiration porn that you're doing because somebody who is not abled in the mainstream language of being abled has done something, or it's some kind of empathy or sympathy that one is trying to derive, right? Because that's all that matters. So, so there, I think for me, right now what I want to, rather than pointing out, obviously I come from that fraternity saying that, okay, yeah, I do accept, and everybody I think accepts that we don't do enough, but I think what we need to drive home now is, there needs to be a consultation process, there needs to be some kind of training, there needs to be some kind of collaboration, so that, just like the disability organization collaborates with government in terms of skilling, in terms of, admission, in terms of a lot of other things. So I think there is where that gap needs to be filled in. So I think that's all I can put in on why we don't do it, because we don't have that kind of education, we don't have that kind of training, and there needs to be some kind of an attitudinal overhauling. That's also a big thing that's required. Yeah, I think.
I'll move to Vicky. Everybody else talks about what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Vicky is one of those guys who's actually doing things. And so, Vicky, you're going to talk about not only your documentary project, but also the book that you have brought out. Why are these stories tellable stories? Because one of the biggest challenges that media faces, and really that's the second stage of the discussion, and I want you to start with you, is that most journalists would say, we don't see the story, right? It's not a good enough story. It's not a big enough story. It does not cover enough people in there, right? But you found stories. You found stories right across the country. and you've done about 100 of them, if I'm not mistaken. So
More
tell
than
us
200.
more than 200. So what I really want to understand is, where do you see stories that, this August media, of which I have been a part before, so I will not excuse myself there, do not really see stories? What do you see are those powerful stories that you think are worth talking about? And give us a flavor of that, and talk a little bit about your book. And I believe you've just come back from showcasing it in the United Nations, to talk a little bit about that as well.
So can I go with in Hindi? ओके तो जो मेरी बुक है, बुक का नाम है एवरीवन इज़ गुड एट समथिंग। तो मैं हमारा एक वेबसाइट है, वेबसाइट का नाम भी एवरीवन इज़ गुड एट समथिंग है। और ये 2020 में स्टार्ट किया था मैंने, तो ऑलमोस्ट 5 साल हो गया होने वाला है मुझे करते हुए। दिसंबर में ही स्टार्ट किया था 2020 में, तो ऑलमोस्ट करीब 5 साल कंप्लीट हो गए। तो इसमें मैं क्या करता हूँ कि मैं पूरे इंडिया के 28 स्टेट और 8 यूटी ट्रैवल किया हूँ, और जो पर्सन विद डिसेबल लोग हैं उनके घर में जाके उनकी फ़ोटो खींचता हूँ। तो आइडिया ये था लोगों के घर जाने का, बिकॉज मैंने देखा था जो अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलती है ना, वो बड़ा सिटी सेंट्रिक है। सिटी वाले को बहुत अपॉर्चुनिटी मिल जाती है, बट जो रूरल इंडिया है उनके बारे में कोई जानता ही नहीं है। तो हमें लगा कि क्यों ना हम रूरल इंडिया की स्टोरी ला करके यहाँ पे लोगों के सामने रखें, ताकि उनकी बातों को भी लोग ध्यान दिया जाए। और हम ऐसा कोई पैमाना नहीं बनाए हैं कि किसी की ने कोई अचीवमेंट किया तो उसका स्टोरी करेंगे और किसी ने नहीं किया तो उसका नहीं करेंगे। तो ऐसा कोई पैमाना नहीं है। हम पर्सन के घर जाते हैं एंड दे आर बहुत वेलकमिंग होते, लाइक पूरा खाना बना के रखते हैं, बड़ा ध्यान रखते हैं, बोलते इधर से आना है, इस होटल में रुकना है, ये सस्ता होता है। और ये मैं पिछले 5 साल से वॉलंटियरली कर रहा हूँ, मतलब इसके लिए मुझे कोई पैसा नहीं मिलता है। तो जो हमारा वेबसाइट है उसमें हम हर हफ्ते एक स्टोरी डालते हैं, एक हफ्ते एक मेल स्टोरी, एक हफ्ते एक फीमेल स्टोरी, ताकि रेशो 50-50 रहे। और इसमें ऑल 21 डिसेबिलिटी जो गवर्नमेंट ने रिकग्नाइज़ किया है, वो सारे 21 डिसेबिलिटी इस वेबसाइट में हमने पब्लिश किया है। तो हमारी टोटल 25 लोगों की टीम है। तो टेक टीम अलग है, वेबसाइट में डालने वाले अलग है, इंटरव्यू के लिए अलग है। तो टीम इतनी बड़ी इस वजह से क्योंकि हर एक राज्य में अलग अलग लैंग्वेज है, एंड लोकल लैंग्वेज में इंटरव्यू करना हर किसी के लिए पॉसिबल नहीं होता, तो हमें उसी स्टेट में कोई वॉलंटियर ढूंढना पड़ता है। तो इस वजह से टोटल 25 लोगों की टीम हुई है। तो इसमें क्या होता है कि, और सारे वॉलंटियर है, किसी को पैसे नहीं मिलते हैं। तो बहुत टाइम क्या होता है कि हमारे वेबसाइट काफ़ी लोगों ने सब्सक्राइब करके रखा है, तो लोग ये कहानी पढ़ते हैं और पढ़ के मुझे कॉल करते हैं कि ये विक्की, मैंने ये कहानी पढ़ा और मैं इसको सपोर्ट करना चाहता हूँ। तो मैं उनको डायरेक्ट कनेक्ट कर देता ताकि बीच में कोई थर्ड पर्सन ना रहे। तो ये मेरा अपने तरफ से कंट्रीब्यूशन है। और जब भी मैं कोई सुनता है कि मैं इस फील्ड में काम करता हूँ, तो लोग मेरे से आके पूछते हैं कि व्हाट इज़ योर कनेक्शन विद डिसेबिलिटी, तुम्हारे घर में कोई है डिसेबल? तो मेरे घर में कोई नहीं है, बट मेरा कंट्रीब्यूशन इस वजह से है। और बहुत लोग काम करते हैं, उनको सैलरी मिलती है, मुझे तो सैलरी भी नहीं मिलता है। बट मैं आपको अपनी एक छोटा सा बैकग्राउंड बता दूं कि मैं बचपन में घर से भाग गया था और मैं नई दिल्ली स्टेशन में कबाड़ी चुनता था। और फिर मैं सलाम वाला के एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, वहाँ रह के बड़ा हुआ, फोटोग्राफी सीखा, पहला एग्जीबिशन किया, वर्ल्ड ट्रेड सेंटर का रिकन्स्ट्रक्शन शूट किया, देन MIT से फेलोशिप मिला। आई इनवाइटेड ऑल लाइक ए बिग शॉट हार्वर्ड एंड पेंटागन, वाइट हाउस, एंड आई वाज लिस्टेड इन फोर्ब्स एशिया 30 अंडर 30 लिस्ट। तो मुझे लगा कि मैं एक कम्युनिटी को रिटर्न कैसे दूँ अपने फ़ोटोग्राफी से। मैं पैसा दे के मदद नहीं कर सकता था, बट मुझे पता था कि मेरे पास एक फ़ोटोग्राफी का पावर है मेरे पास, तो मैं उस पावर से रिटर्न कैसे दूँ सोसाइटी को। तो दैट्स हाउ दिस वर्क स्टार्ट।
As always, fascinating. Yeah. Dr. Agarwal, where is he gone? He's not here. Okay. Can somebody from Sarthak come and sit and take the middle seat? Somebody whom I'm going to ask a few questions. Between the two of you, figure out. Whoever wants to be on the hot seat. There you go. Give him a hand, yeah. Wonderful. So, every time we discuss this issue, there's a question that keeps happening. Keep media लिखता नहीं है, लिखता नहीं है, लिखता नहीं है. They don't write about us. They don't cover our issues. And the issues they cover, then you say, oh, they are hero stories, they are tragedy stories. So let me ask you a question. What is the kind of stories do you think should be written?
Good evening to everybody, and thank you for attending this conference organized by Sarthak. I would just like to say that there are some stories, I think they fall under the category of inspirational stories, which need to be covered. For instance, recently we went to Metz in France to take part in the Olympics. This happened last year, and India got 7 medals. 7 medals were the highest we had ever got in any competition outside the country. But again, there was total deafening silence on the part of the media. The media could easily have highlighted this achievement and covered, interviewed some of the winners of those medals. That could easily have happened, and some of them are sitting in the audience today. So it was, I think, really a missed opportunity.
But let's take it a step forward. These are big achievements, right? They happen once in a year. But that's not really the charge on the media, that they just don't cover the big events. Some they cover, some they don't. But there are real issues. For instance, Kalyan talked about it, Rati talked about it, that you have issues like not enough, why aren't the seats getting filled which are there for disabled people, right? There was this question that was put up. Let me just refresh myself. Why is no census on disability? Why don't you go to a disabled person and ask about budgets? Now, I'm going to put this slightly differently and say, is there a challenge in the sense that why aren't disabled people taking on issues and putting it out and fighting these issues out? Why is the voice missing? Why is it that you're depending upon the news person is just supposed to report what's happening and what he finds interesting? Why are we not able to do so? Because, it's now, you don't really need official media in order to get coverage done, right? You're not the only one on the spot. I'm going to ask everybody to answer the same question. But to me, it's also a question of, are we, from the people who are involved in the disability sector, are we training enough people? Are we looking at there and say, there are hard stories that need to be written. You want to be made important, you want what you are doing is important. Why don't we start doing that exercise of identifying hardcore stories and going after it?
Well, let me turn this question on the head. You said that persons with disabilities, they are not asked about the budgets. Who's going to ask them? It is you, after all. The media has to ask them. The media has to amplify those voices from the ground.
Maybe the voices need to stand up and start speaking about it. Today, you don't need media to go out there. How many disabled influencers have you seen on social media?
None, actually.
Right. Why? Why aren't we training them enough?
Is it only a question of training, I wonder?
Shradha, this is...
Yeah. So, so there was an interesting... I'll talk about an interesting person. I'm sure everybody, you all also know, someone, he's a doctor at University College of Medical Science, Dr. Satyendra. Yeah. So, for me to understand, when I started as a reporter, like when I started as a cub reporter, so for me, because this issue was also something, I was interested in to cover, but obviously that can't be your mainstream beat. It's just your side beat, because that's what it is considered. You can't say, I am a person who reports on disability, so that's another thing altogether. But he was the one who, because he was there vocal, there standing there, raising issues, be it about his university, or be it about issues like when there was pollution and there was odd even implemented, and how, it was difficult for people with disability because they could not drive. They need a special kind of car that they have. So, so those issues, I understood a lot of disability, their issues through him. And so he is he's one of the person that I've seen who's very vocal, but also it is like sir mentioned, like but also it's also kind of, it's about access, right? He is also a sort, some kind of, social media is also some kind of privilege, you know. Not everybody can, I think sir was hinting towards using social media to tell your stories, but not everybody has that kind of access to social media, and also social media has that some kind of an algorithm and some kind of thing which is difficult to figure out, right? So that ways, I think.
Why don't you get Ravish here as well? Our last panelist is also in, so we might as well. Shortly? Okay. No, please don't go. We haven't finished with you. Right. But yeah, I'll let you know. Yes, we'll have another chair. Why don't you give me a chair and Ravish, please come. Everybody's waiting for you to answer a question. Come, come. Here you come.
Yeah, you should, because I'm there all alone here answering the media question.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I'm good. Yeah. Ravish, why don't you? Okay, now I get the advantage. I use the podium. Okay. Right, maybe.
Yeah. So since you mentioned, like, I think you were hinting towards using social media to tell your story, right? But also you need to understand social media also has a weird kind of algorithm, you know. For them also, even if you're using Instagram also will take a certain kind of story, certain kind of, you know, their algorithm is set in, because it's a media at the end of the day, right? So they'll pick up certain kind of stories, and you, to get your stories across, you need to have that certain kind of followers. So that's again another aspect, you know, which it's easier said than done. So that's what I wanted to put it across like that.
Okay, maybe Rati and then Kalyan would like to take up the same question, and then for Ravish's benefit, I'll repeat the question.
So frankly, I started working in the disability sector under a person called Javed Abadi. और सर आपको तो हम लोग ने बहुत चेज़ करके तंग किया जब आप secretary थे. But you know, and what I have learned is that, you know, there are two kinds of roles that we as organizations can play. One is, of course, pure service delivery, which is very, very important. You need to take services to people who need them. But I think the entire process is completely incomplete unless you're working on advocacy. I can train 500 people for a job, but if there is no bus to take them to their place of work, and Mr. Joshi is following here and so is Preeti, some people who will agree with me here, but if you don't have that bus that can take them to that job, if you don't have a toilet which they can use in those 8 hours they're there, don't you think half your battle is lost already? So service delivery must work very closely with advocacy, where you must create these young leaders, young, old, whatever. There are, each one of them is an advocate in their own space. And now I see a lot of younger people, Arman, Satinder, Javed of course is no more. And at the grassroots levels, the number of people we have created who are actually such strong advocates for the rights of persons with disabilities, it's not that there's a dearth of them. It's just that they have to get that right opportunity. You have enough and more advocates and you have enough and more successful stories of success. Having said that, there's one little issue that I will bring up, and it's a little bit to do with maybe Kalyan's conversation also around caste, is that I think because of the stigma attached to disability, and the fact is that it has not yet been accepted and normalized, you are still a person with disability. And I hate to be the one to say this, but you know, the very word PwD makes me cringe sometimes, but you are a person with disability. And you will find in the services, for example, you will have IS officers belonging to a certain caste, and they take a lot of pride in it. But you'll never see a group of IS officers that say, you know, we are disabled officers. There is still that stigma attached. And unless, what I said in the beginning, unless we normalize disability, I think it's going to be that much of a harder fight for people.
Kalyan,
Yeah,
go ahead.
So in fact, I'll just quickly share 2 media headlines which had recently appeared, and then I'll also share the reason why. So one was in the newspaper The Hindu, which the headline is Road to Health Care for the Disabled Paved with No Intention. This talks about that how PwDs find it very difficult to access health insurance, which is every human being's right, but they find it very, very difficult to access health insurance. In instances where they are able to get that government benefit of government insurance policy, they run into problem when claims are assessed. So they have to, while they have the insurance, so to say that, okay, I have got so-and-so insurance policy or so-and-so assurance from Government of India, when it goes to the third party, huge amount is deducted and they still have to pay. The same principle doesn't apply to a person with no disability. The fact is, somewhere media is reporting because they got the story. So, sir, storytelling has to be your responsibility. How you tell the story, how you push out your story, it's something that you will have to think. And again, talking about, Supriyo, this is more from PR perspective. Peso, we talk about paid media, so I'm ruling that out. Earned is what, these voices are nothing but earned media. Then there is shared stories, and then there is owned stories. So you have your website. Make enough noise on your website. Don't start thinking कि मेरा website कितना लोग देखते हैं. सर आप अपनी story निकालो ना रे. कुछ नहीं तो आपकी जो captive audience है, let them see and let them magnify it. आजकल ऐसे influencer दिख रहे हैं जिनका आप मतलब वीडियो देखिए तो start cringing यार. What is it that I'm seeing? But if those kind of videos could get millions of viewers, I'm sure you have more powerful stories to push. So make that effort. Media will take note of it. And then budget का आपने बोला, लोगों ने अपना अपना relevance government को दिखाया है. If nothing else, मतलब farmer आजकल क्यों, ठीक है वो MSP मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा वो बात की बात है, पर जब आके बैठते हैं तो पूरा दिल्ली की barricading क्यों हो जाती है? Because they have a voice and they have made their voice heard. Constructive, nuisance value, whatever we may like to call it. But the fact is when they sit there, पूरा दिल्ली बंद हो जाता है. I'm not saying कि कल से आप agitation शुरू कर दीजिए, but you have to make your presence felt, you have to make your voice heard, and only then media will report. And yes, there are some media houses who are looking for those stories. So you will have to create your narrative, you will have to push your narrative, and don't expect overnight result. Yeah, so that's my take.
Yeah. I'll get Ravish into the conversation. I'm going to get Ravish. Okay. Wrap up. Okay. All right. I think other things are going to start happening, so we'll have to wrap up quickly. Ravish, you get the last word on this one, which is, first there were two questions that we ran with. First is, why does media not report on the sector? And the second question is are people with disability, other people who are working with disability, doing enough to make the advocacy be heard? Are we raising enough voices? Do we have a think tank? Should we be putting together a think tank? Should we be looking at data and generating data ourselves rather than waiting for the government to do census when they want and then we'll say, okay, we're going to work on it? Should we be people who are looking out there and say, let's have our own reports? We have data, we know what is happening on the ground. Why don't we do much more work on this? But that was supposed to be my concluding statement. Nonetheless, Ravish, up to you. You have to defend. Why is the media not reporting us? Why are you guys so bad here? Huh?
जी मैं टीवी मीडिया से जुड़ा हुआ हूँ. तो टीवी मीडिया की कहानी आपसे छुपी नहीं है. बहुत सारे लोग बहुत कुछ बोला करते हैं और मैं चूँकि एक हिस्सा हूँ तो कई बार ये सोचता हूँ कि इस पर स्टोरी होनी चाहिए लेकिन नहीं कर पाते हैं. उसके दो तीन रीज़न होते हैं. एक तो टीवी मीडिया को विजुअल चाहिए. हो सकता है कि कभी कभी विजुअली स्ट्रांग ना हो तो फिर वो खबर नहीं जाती है. दूसरी बात आपने बताई कि डेटा को मिलना, कहाँ से उसको लिया जाए, इसमें हो सकता है कि आपके भी संस्था की कहीं ना कहीं कुछ न कुछ कमियां हो सकती हैं कि आप लोग उस तरीके से प्रोवाइड नहीं कर पा रहे होंगे डेटा को। तीसरी चीज़ है कि अभी जो मीडिया का एक पूरा आप आउटलुक देखिए तो उसमें बहुत सारे मुद्दों की कोई चर्चा नहीं होती है, इंक्लूडिंग किसान एक बहुत बड़ा वर्ग है, 80 करोड़ लोग हैं, लेकिन आप देखिए कितना मीडिया उस पर टाइम अपना वो करता है। तो वेरियस रीज़न हैं, जैसा आपने कहा कि व्यूवरशिप पाने के लिए तमाम सारे लोग ऐसे वीडियोस बनाते हैं, लेकिन एक एक्चुअल जो मुद्दा है उस पर कुछ वीडियो नहीं बन पाते हैं, उन विषयों को नहीं उठाया जाता है। अभी आपने देखा होगा कि पूजा खेड़कर ने एक फर्जी सर्टिफिकेट लिया, उसकी बड़ी चर्चा रही, हम ही लोगों ने तमाम सारी खबरें बनाई। लेकिन मैं एक बात ये ज़रूर कहना चाहता हूँ कि डिसेबल्ड पर्सन जो हैं वो अपनी ताकत, अपने सामर्थ्य के बल पर अब टीवी मीडिया के लिए भी एबल्ड पर्सन होते जा रहे हैं। वो इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ क्योंकि अभी आपने देखा कि पैरा ओलंपिक में कितने मेडल आए और किस तरीके से हमारे टीवी पर उसका कवरेज हुआ। अभी मैं एक काफ़ी बड़ी कंपनी में गया था, मैंने उस पर सोचा भी कि स्टोरी करने के लिए। उन्होंने तमाम सारे लोगों को ट्रेडिंग में उन्होंने नौकरियां दे रखी थी, काफ़ी मतलब बड़े पैमाने पर हमने देखा 200-250 लोगों को सर ट्रेडिंग पे उन्होंने नौकरियां दे रखी थी। तो उस पर इस तरीके की स्टोरियां बहुत सारी हैं जहां पर आपकी तादाद कम है, आप उतनी अपने तकलीफ़ को, अपने समस्याओं को उठा नहीं पाते हैं, लेकिन आपने अपनी ताकत और सामर्थ्य के दम पर बहुत बार ये सिद्ध किया है कि अगर टीवी मीडिया नहीं भी, अगर कोई भी मीडिया नहीं भी उठाना चाहता है तो आपके अंदर वो काबिलियत है कि आप अपनी चीज़ों को एक पॉजिटिव वे में ला पाते हैं टीवी के सामने, दूसरे मीडिया के सामने। तो मैं अभी बोलने लगूंगा तो बहुत कुछ इस मीडिया के बारे में बोलने को है मेरे पास में, लेकिन यही है कि मैं बस ये उम्मीद मतलब जता सकता हूँ कि आने वाले समय में आपकी आवाज़ को और ज़्यादा हम लोग उठाएंगे और उठाना चाहिए भी। बस एक कोशिश किया करिए, कई बार होता है ना कि हम लोगों के बीच में कम्युनिकेशन गैप हो जाता है। कई बार जैसा मैंने बताया कि डेटा नहीं आ पाते हैं या कोई विषय हम लोगों के सामने नहीं उस तरीके से आती है जिस पर हम लोग, क्योंकि इतने हर दिन कुछ ना कुछ इतने इवेंट होते रहते हैं और इतनी चीज़ें हो जाती हैं कि जो कई बार आप लोगों की बात को हम लोग नहीं समझ पाते हैं या हम नहीं उस तरीके से रिसीव कर पाते जिस तरीके से आप हमें बताना चाहते हैं। तो थोड़ा सा एक ऐसा कुछ मंच होना चाहिए जो हम आपस में इंटरेक्ट करते रहें और आपसे जुड़ी हुई चीज़ें जो है वो हमें मिलती रहें। शुक्रिया सर।
Thank you. I think there is a lot more that is going to happen, so there's much excitement happening there. We'll have to wrap up this session now. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful panel. Thank you so much for joining, sir. It was sorry to put you on the hot seat, but that was a wonderful part of it. Thank you so much.
I would request everybody to stay on. We would want to thank you and give you a memento and a token of appreciation for the words you have shared. Can I request our mentor, our guru, Shri Krishan Kalra ji and Vijay Jodha ji to come and felicitate our media panelists. Shri Krishan Kalra ji handing over a memento to Shri Kalyan Ranjan ji. Can I request Vijay Jodha ji to hand over the memento to Ravish ji? Can I request Krishan Kalra ji to hand over the memento to Miss Shradha Chhetri ji?
जय श्री राम जय श्री राम पतित पावन सीताराम जय श्री राम जय श्री राम जय श्री राम जय श्री राम।
Can I request Vijay Jodha ji to hand over the memento to Vicky Roy ji? Can I request Krishan Kalra ji to hand over The memento to Rati Misra ji. Thank you, Rati ji, for coming all the way and expressing your views. Can I request Vijay Jodha ji to hand over the memento to Supriyo ji, please? In the front, both media professionals. Thank you. A round of applause. Can we have a group photo, please? Can we have a group photo, please? Excitement is building up. The results are gonna be out soon.